StudyJesus.com presents Bible Stories, where biblical stories of the ages come alive.
It was nearly 9 o'clock on Friday morning when Jesus was led out of the city to be crucified. He had to carry his own cross part of the way, but later on a man on the way was ordered to carry it for him. A large crowd followed Jesus, and many of the women cried aloud. Turning to the crying women, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. The days are coming when you'll wish that your children had never been born, and that the mountains and the hills would hide you from the trouble that your eyes shall see." Continuing with our series on the life of Christ, this story from the Holy Bible is titled, "The Death and Burial of Jesus."
Precious memories.
StudyJesus.com presents Bible Stories with your host, Dr. Joe Jackson. Stories directly from God's holy word, told in easy-to-understand story form that the whole family will enjoy, and featuring the work of a talented artist illustrating each week's story. Now gather the family because it's time for this week's Bible story.
There were two thieves who were led to be crucified this same day, and they were also in the procession. They all marched out through the city gate to the place called Calvary, and there the cruel work was done. Jesus was nailed to the cross which stood in the middle, and the thieves were placed one on his right and one on his left. Jesus didn't speak until the cross was being lifted, and then he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Soldiers were left to guard the crosses, but these men felt no pity, and they began at once to cast lots to see what share each might have of the clothes which had been taken from the men who were being crucified. A title or sign had been written to place over each cross, telling what the man's name was and what wicked deed he'd done. Over the cross of Jesus, Pilate had put this sign, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." And this was written in 3 different languages so that everyone could read it. And when the rulers of the children of Israel saw the sign, they weren't pleased with it. They weren't willing to have it stay there. And they went to Pilate saying, "This sign is wrong. Write not the King of the Jews, but that he said, 'I'm the King of the Jews.'" But Pilate had done all he wanted to do for them, and he wouldn't change it. People came from out of the city to see what was going on, and as they passed by, they mocked Jesus, saying, "If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross." The chief priests and scribes smiled as they said, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. If he's the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we'll believe him. He trusted in God. Let his Father save him now, if he's the Son of God." The soldiers also mocked Jesus, offering him sour wine and saying, "If you're the King of the Jews, save yourself." One of the thieves at Jesus' side repeated what he'd heard the others say, and he said to Jesus, "If you're the Christ, save yourself and save us." The other thief was ashamed of that thief, and he told him to stop. And he said, "It's right that you and I should be punished, for we've been wicked men. But this man has done nothing wrong." And this thief then turned to Jesus and said, "Lord, will you remember me when you come into your kingdom?" And Jesus answered him and said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." The enemies of Jesus were not the only ones who stayed near him. Some women drew near the cross also, and among the women was Mary, mother of Jesus. Mary stood by John, and seeing them standing there together, Jesus said to his mother, "Behold your son," and to John, "Behold your mother." John knew by this that Jesus wanted him to take care of Mary. And from that hour on, John took Mary, the mother of Jesus, to his home and cared for her. It was now a little after 12 noon, the time when the sun should have been shining more brightly than it had shone all day. But it began to be dark, and for 3 hours the darkness of night was over the land. The afternoon passed away, and every moment brought greater pain and agony to Jesus. It was dark all around Jesus, and there was no one to comfort him. It seemed as if even his Father in heaven had left him. And Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In hearing Jesus say this, some of the people who stood by said, "He's calling for Elias. Let him alone. Let's see whether Elias will come to take him down." One of the words that Jesus had used was Eloi, which sounded a little like the word Elias. A few minutes passed, and Jesus said, "I thirst." Some kind friend dipped a sponge in sour wine and pressed it to Jesus' lips. And when he had taken it, he cried out, "It is finished." And just a moment later, Jesus added, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." His sufferings were now over. His earthly life was now ended. His spirit had gone to be with his Father in heaven. Just then there was a great earthquake. The earth shook, and great rocks were broken in pieces, and a great noise was heard, and the graves were opened. The curtain in the temple, which separated the two rooms and was never lifted except on the great day of atonement, that curtain was torn top to bottom. When the soldier who was on guard at the cross saw what was done, he said, Truly, this was the Son of God." The people who had come from Jerusalem to see the crucifixion were afraid, and they returned to the city. The friends of Jesus stood afar off, filled with wonder and sadness. 7 times Jesus had spoken while he was on the cross. Today these are called the 7 words from the cross. There were 2 men in the Sanhedrin who had tried to save Jesus because they believed all that he had said to them. One of these was Nicodemus, whom you've heard about before, and the other was a rich man by the name of Joseph. Soon after Jesus died, Joseph went to Pilate and begged that he might have the body. Pilate first called to him the soldier who had guarded the cross to ask him whether Jesus was dead for certain, because sometimes people who were crucified lived and suffered hanging on the cross there for several days. But the crowd and rulers of the children of Israel had been anxious that these bodies should not hang on the cross on Saturday, which was the next day and the coming Sabbath day. And that Sabbath began around 6 o'clock Friday evening, and it was especially holy to the children of Israel at this particular time because of the Passover. The soldiers had broken the legs of the thieves so that they would die quicker. But they had passed Jesus by because they saw that he was already dead. The soldier whom Pilate called to him knew that it was certainly so because he had himself thrust a spear through Jesus' side. And he had done that because if they'd made a mistake and Jesus really wasn't dead, the soldiers themselves might lose their own lives. So Pilate gave the body of Jesus to Joseph. Joseph had a new tomb cut out of the rock, which had never been used. Nicodemus helped him to carry the body of Jesus, and after wrapping it in pure white linen and some sweet-smelling spices, which Nicodemus brought, they very lovingly laid Jesus' body in the tomb. They rolled a big stone against the door and went away. The women who had been watching all day waited until they saw where Jesus was laid, and then they went to their homes to prepare spices and perfumes by which they would anoint Jesus' body. Nothing more could be done now until after Saturday, the Sabbath day. The disciples were careful to do nothing on the Sabbath day that the children of Israel could find fault with. And two, they knew that God had commanded that no work should be done on the Sabbath day when it could be helped, but that it should be kept holy to God. The Sanhedrin were not yet fully satisfied, and they went to Pilate to ask another favor. And they said to Pilate, "Sir, we remember that this deceitful man had said while he was yet alive that after 3 days I will rise again. What we want to ask now is that soldiers guard the tomb where he's laid until after the 3rd day, for fear that his disciples will come in the night and steal his body away and then say to the people that he's risen from the dead. That would be worse than anything that's happened to us up to now." Pilate, who was willing that the tomb should be guarded, said, "You can have watchmen. Go and make these things as safe as you can." Off they went to the tomb to see that everything was done right. They left soldiers to guard the tomb, and they sealed the stone which was before the door to the tomb in such a way that it couldn't be moved without breaking the seal. And anyone who did that would be severely punished by law.
Precious memories, unseen angels, sent from somewhere to my soul.